18,000 feet. No parachute. He jumped and survived. March 1944, Nazi Germany. A British rear gunner's bomber is on fire. He reaches for his parachute. It's already burning. Two choices: burn alive inside the aircraft, or jump 3.5 miles with nothing on his back. He jumped. His name was Nicholas Alkemade, 21 years old, Royal Air Force. His position on the bomber, the worst one. Talon Charlie. A tiny glass turret at the very back of a Lancaster bomber. Surrounded by nothing but thin perspex and guns. If enemy fighters attack, he's the first target. And here's the detail that matters most. His parachute didn't fit inside the turret. It was stored inside the fuselage, behind a small hatch, a tight crawl space away. So if fire breaks out between him and that parachute, he's trapped. Remember that. It becomes important very soon. March 24, 1944. The target tonight, Berlin. One of the most heavily defended cities on Earth. Walls of anti-aircraft guns, blinding searchlights, night fighters prowling the darkness with radar. On some Berlin raids, 1 in every 10 bombers never came home. The crews knew the odds. They flew anyway. That night, Nick climbed into his turret on Lancaster DS664. 7 men, 1 bomber. Pilot, flight engineer, navigator, bomb aimer, wireless operator, mid-upper gunner. And Nick alone in the tail. They took off into freezing darkness. Formed up with hundreds of other bombers. A massive stream of aircraft heading east. Hours of cold, the constant drone of 4 engines, nothing to see but stars and blackness. Then Germany. Flak starts bursting around them, bright orange explosions that shake the aircraft. Searchlights sweep the sky like giant fingers, hunting for silhouettes. Nick rotates his turret constantly. Scanning. Looking for the one thing deadlier than flak. Night fighters. A flicker of exhaust flame, a dark shape against the stars, the sudden wink of cannon fire. Any of those means you have seconds to react. Or you're dead. They reach Berlin, bomb doors open, bombs drop. The Lancaster, lighter now, banks hard and turns for home. The worst should be over. It isn't. Somewhere on the return leg, in the deep darkness over Germany, something finds them. A German night fighter. Likely a Junkers Ju-88, twin engines, radar-equipped, built specifically to kill bombers in the dark. It comes from below and behind. The one angle Nick can barely see from his turret. No warning. Cannons open up. Shells tear through the Lancaster. Engine hit, fuel lines ruptured. And then fire. Not a small fire. A catastrophic spreading fire. Flames race along the wing. Fuel feeds them. They crawl into the fuselage. From his turret, Nick watches the body of his own aircraft glow orange from within. Smoke pours through every gap and seam. The bomber starts to shudder, controls failing. The aircraft begins to roll. The intercom crackles one final time. Bail out, bail out. For the rest of the crew, that means grab your parachute, clip it on, find a hatch, jump. For Nick in his tail turret, it means something very different. He has to rotate the turret, open the doors, pull himself through a narrow hatch into the fuselage, find his parachute on its rack, clip it on, then crawl to the rear escape hatch. He starts the procedure, rotates the turret, opens the doors. Heat hits him like an open furnace. Smoke rushes in, thick and black. He pulls himself forward, reaching through the hatch toward the rack where his parachute is stored. His hand finds fabric. He grabs it. It disintegrates. The parachute pack is on fire. Canvas turning to ash, straps melting. He tries again, pushes deeper into the heat. The flames drive him back. Now stop and put yourself in his position. You're in a metal tube, on fire, 18,000 feet in the air. The plane is starting to spin. Your only way to survive, your parachute, is burning in front of your eyes. There is no second parachute. There is no other exit plan. Two options remain. Stay inside, burn to death in the next 60 seconds. Or go outside, fall 3.5 miles, hit the ground at 120 miles per hour. Both are death. But one is fast. Nick later said his thinking was simple. If I'm going to die, I'd rather die in the air than burn. He pulled himself back into the turret, took off his helmet, ripped away his oxygen mask, thought for just a moment about his fiancée waiting back in England, looked one last time down the length of the fuselage. A tunnel of flame. Then he turned to face the open sky and stepped backward into nothing. Cold air hit him like a wall of ice. 1 second, fire, heat, screaming metal. Next second, silence. Freezing wind, stars above, darkness below. He tumbled at first, spinning, disoriented. Then his body stabilized. He was falling on his back. Looking up. Above him, his Lancaster. A burning comet, trailing fire, spiraling downward. Pieces breaking away. Then it disappeared. And he was alone. Falling. 18,000 feet of empty air beneath him. Terminal velocity, around 120 miles per hour. At that speed, hitting the ground is like hitting concrete from a 10-story building. Every bone shatters, organs rupture. Death is instant. Nick knew this. But something unexpected happened. He stopped being afraid. Later he described it as a strange calm, almost peaceful. He said, "I'd done everything I could. Whatever happened now was out of my hands." The stars were bright above him. The air was impossibly cold. And he just fell. Seconds stretched into what felt like minutes. The wind roared past his ears, then seemed to fade into silence. His body went numb from the cold. He was waiting to die. Then cloud. He plunged into it, wet gray, freezing. Visibility zero. No way to know how close the ground was. No way to brace. No way to prepare. He burst out the bottom of the cloud layer. And in the last seconds of his fall, he saw something below him. Dark shapes rushing up. Trees. Crack. The first branch hit him, or he hit it. Crack, crack, crack. Pine branches snapping, breaking, bending. Each one stealing a fraction of his speed. Each impact sending pain through his body. But each one slowing him slightly. He smashed through the canopy and hit snow. Deep snow. It compressed beneath him, not like concrete but like a rough, frozen cushion. He punched through the surface. Plunged in. Everything went dark. Silence. Complete silence. Then pain. Pain in his back, his knee, his ribs. But pain means something. Pain means alive. He opened his eyes. Snow around him, broken branches above, a jagged hole in the treetops where his body had torn through. Beyond the hole, stars. He tested his body. Wiggled his toes, they moved. Flexed his fingers, they worked. Tried to sit up, sharp pain in his back and left knee. But nothing was shattered, no bone sticking through skin, no paralysis. He was bruised, cut, burned in places from the aircraft. His knee was badly sprained. His back screamed with every movement. But he was whole. He had fallen 18,000 feet. 3.5 miles. Without a parachute. And he was alive. He lay there in the snow, breathing hard, staring up at the stars through broken pine branches, trying to process a fact that made no sense. Then he reached into his pocket, pulled out his cigarette case, dented but intact, lit one with shaking hands, and smoked it. Later he called it the strangest, most satisfying cigarette of his entire life. He couldn't walk far, the knee was too damaged. So he lay in the snow and waited. It didn't take long. German voices. Footsteps crunching through the snow. A patrol, alerted by the bomber's crash, found him. A British airman in a flight suit, lying in the snow beneath shattered trees. No parachute anywhere in sight. They took him prisoner. At the interrogation center, they asked the obvious question. "Where is your parachute?" Nick told the truth. "It burned, I jumped without one, from 18,000 feet. They stared at him. They told him that was impossible. He said, "I know, but I'm here." They didn't believe him. They thought he was a spy, that he'd hidden his parachute, that his story was a cover. Nick didn't change a single detail, no matter how many times they asked. So the Germans investigated. They found the wreckage of Lancaster DS664. They found Nick's tail turret smashed and scorched. They found the parachute rack and the charred remains of a parachute pack destroyed by fire exactly where Nick said it would be. They checked radar records and ground reports, confirming the bomber's altitude when it broke apart. They examined the landing site, pine forest, deep snow, broken branches in a vertical line from canopy to ground. Everything matched. Every single detail. The Germans issued an official document confirming his account. Nick kept that document for the rest of his life. He was sent to Stalag Luft III, a prisoner of war camp. The same camp where the famous Great Escape had happened just days earlier. At the camp, other Allied airmen heard his story. These were men who had themselves survived burning aircraft, crash landings, and bailouts gone wrong. They didn't believe him either. Then he showed them the German report. The room went quiet. Among men who had faced the impossible, Nick's story stood alone. Of the 7 men aboard Lancaster DS664 that night, not all were as fortunate as Nick. The bomber took lives with it when it fell. Nick had survived, but the cost of that night was not his alone. The war ended in 1945. The POW camps were liberated. Nick went home to England. He married his fiancée, the woman he'd thought about in those final seconds before he jumped. She had spent months not knowing if he was alive or dead. He got a job, first in chemical work, then as a factory security guard. He lived quietly. He never chased fame, never wrote a book, never went on speaking tour. When people asked about the fall, he told the story simply and honestly. Then, he went back to his ordinary life. He died in 1987, age 64, natural causes. He had outlived the bomber, the war, and every person who had ever told him that what he did was impossible. So how did he survive? The answer isn't magic. It's physics pushed to its absolute limit. The trees were the first factor. Every pine branch he hit was like a tiny break. It didn't stop him, but it stole a little bit of his speed. Dozens of branches, each absorbing a fraction of his energy, each one reducing the force of the final impact. The snow was the second factor. Deep, fresh snow, nature's crash cushion. Instead of stopping him all at once like hard ground wood, it compressed, spreading the impact over distance and time. His age was the third factor. At 21, his bones were dense and flexible. His body could absorb punishment that might have killed someone older. And the fourth factor, location. Pure, blind, stupid luck. Move him 100 meters to the left, open field, frozen solid, dead. 100 meters to the right, a road, a rooftop, a rock face, dead. Different night, no snow on the ground, dead. He hit the one tiny window where survival was possible. Not probable, not likely. Possible. A chain of factors so unlikely that if you calculated the odds, they'd have more zeros after the decimal point than you could fit on a page. But unlikely is not the same as impossible. And that's the part of Nick's story people often miss. They remember the fall. They forget the choice. Nick didn't jump because he thought he'd live. He jumped because staying meant certain, agonizing death. Fire or sky. Slow or fast. He chose the sky. And in that desperate split-second decision, made when every option looked like the end, he opened a door. A door to the trees, the snow, the cold air, the stars. The cigarette in the forest. The years that followed. The life he almost didn't have. When everything is burning, when there's no good option left, sometimes there's still a crack. A chance so thin you can barely see it. But you have to choose it. Or it doesn't exist at all. 18,000 feet. No parachute. 3.5 miles of empty air. One man who chose the sky over the fire. And lived. This happened. This is documented. This is real. Nicholas Alkemade fell 18,000 feet without a parachute and survived. Because impossible is not the same as zero. Nick Alkemade's story is one of the most extreme survivals in recorded history. But he's not the only person who faced the impossible and came out the other side. If this story moved you, hit like. It helps more people find these stories. And subscribe, because the next story might be even harder to believe.